יעבור לדוח. טוב.
This is my video update from Belgrade, Serbia on this Tuesday, midday, October the 17th. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with the Sky News interview with U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, where the UK broadcaster they asked the U.S. Treasury Secretary if the U.S. can afford two wars. And here is what Yellen said, and I quote, "America can certainly afford to stand with Israel and to support Israel's military needs. And we also can and must support Ukraine in its struggle against Russia." That is what Janet Yellen told Sky News. The U.S. can absolutely afford two wars.
Paul Tudor-Jones, the famed investor, was on CNBC this week, and he said, "This is the most threatening and challenging geopolitical environment that I've ever seen. At the same time, the US is in its weakest fiscal position since World War II, with debt to GDP at 122%. Can America, can the West afford another war at this time?"
I think the answer is absolutely. America can certainly afford to stand with Israel and to support Israel's military needs, and we also can and must support Ukraine in its struggle against Russia. And look, the American economy is doing extremely well.
Anyway, the Wall Street Journal, they seem to disagree with Janet Yellen. The Wall Street Journal does not believe that the United States can handle two wars. They ran an article with the title, "How the Israel-Hamas War is Tilting the Global Power Balance in Favor of Russia and China." So the Wall Street Journal, they're basically disagreeing with Janet Yellen, and they are saying that another conflict that the U.S. has to support is actually playing into the hands of Russia and China. So that is the Wall Street Journal, in a way, disagreeing with Janet Yellen and saying that the U.S. cannot take on all these wars, and all these wars that the U.S. is taking on are benefiting Russia and China. And Yellen, she attended the Eurogroup finance ministers meeting in Luxembourg, and the New York Times reported on this meeting. And they ran an article with the title, "Yellen Assures Europe That the U.S. Will Provide More Funds to Ukraine." The Treasury Secretary reassured allies that the Biden administration was not backing away from Ukraine despite opposition in Congress. And Janet Yellen, she told the EU finance ministers in Luxembourg, and I quote, "The Biden administration is committed to supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. We will work with Congress to pass a robust Ukraine package into law." And when Yellen means a robust Ukraine package into law, the New York Times is reporting that Yellen told the EU finance ministers that the Biden White House is indeed trying to put together a package worth more than the $24 billion that they were talking about a few months ago. And this package is going to be a one and done aid package to the Zelenskyy regime. This is something that the UK Telegraph reported on a couple of weeks ago, that the Biden White House was seeking to provide Ukraine with much more than $24 billion in what would be called a one and done package, so that they give the money to the Zelenskyy regime and they tell the Zelenskyy regime to go away and not bother the Biden White House until after the 2024 election. So it looks like Janet Yellen is confirming the reporting of a one and done aid package that is being put together for the Zelenskyy regime and for Project Ukraine. And the EU finance ministers, they are indeed in a panic. They are very worried that the United States is going to dump Project Ukraine, because the United States cannot take on two wars at one time, and all the priority now is focused on Israel. It's placed on Israel, and the EU is starting to get very nervous and very worried that the U.S. is starting to ignore and move away from Project Ukraine. And the last thing that Europe wants is to be left holding the bag of a catastrophic Ukraine conflict. So EU panic over the fact that over the fear that the U.S. may be distancing itself from Project Ukraine. But Yellen told all of the finance ministers in Europe to not worry. The Biden White House will support Ukraine for, say it with me, as long as it takes. So Professor Biden, he is, according to the New York Times, he is going to be traveling to Israel on October the 18th, tomorrow. He will be making a trip to Israel. Israel has asked for an aid package of $10 billion, and they'll get that. They will get that $10 billion in aid from the Biden White House. Biden's going to go to Israel, meet with Netanyahu, see what's going on, and assess the situation. Biden is going to go to Israel to assess the situation on the ground, to see what's going on. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived in China for the One Belt, One Road summit. It's going to be a 2-day visit to China. Putin will be meeting with Xi Jinping. He will be participating in the summit. He will meet with Xi Jinping, and Russia and China, of course, will discuss BRICS, One Belt, One Road, the conflict in Ukraine, and they will discuss and coordinate their next moves with the war in Israel and in Gaza. Blinken, when he was in Saudi Arabia, I reported on this yesterday, when Blinken was in Saudi Arabia, he was supposed to meet with MBS the evening when he was in Saudi Arabia. That night, he was supposed to be meeting with MBS. And I said in my video yesterday that MBS kept Blinken waiting for a couple of hours. Well, that was wrong. MBS actually kept Blinken waiting all night. And MBS decided to finally meet with the U.S. Secretary of State in the morning. He kept Blinken waiting all night. MBS, it's a pretty big. That's a pretty big power move from MBS. No doubt, Saudi Arabia is sending a message to the Biden White House with that move. And I also reported yesterday in my video on Biden's 60 Minutes interview, where Professor Biden said that the United States and the collective West should put Putin down. Once they finish putting Putin down, then the world is going to be at peace. That was pretty much what Biden said to 60 Minutes. That was the script. That was the script that Biden read off of. And Dmitry Medvedev, he put out a tweet in response to this 60-minute interview of Professor Biden. And here is what Dmitry Medvedev said. Biden has announced his desire to run for president, unite all of Europe, and put down the president of Russia, where he cannot cause the kind of trouble he's been causing. So this is what the US president's mission is all about. And we used to think naively that it was to secure Americans' prosperity. Anyway, nothing of it is going to happen. One of the reasons is because he has already forgotten what he said. Dementia is a useful thing. Medvedev, man, Medvedev. He is a social media master. He is absolutely amazing with social media. Let's see. Biden is going to Israel, and we also have reports which claim that the U.S. will be sending 2,000 Marines to Israel as well. Now, I'm getting conflicting reports as to what this mission is going to be all about. The Pentagon, they said that these Marines will absolutely not be part of the combat ground operations, and they're only going to be in Israel playing a support role, playing a role in for humanitarian, medical reasons and stuff like that. Coordination, consulting, humanitarian, military reasons, and the Pentagon made it clear that these Marines will not fight. But there are other reports which claim that these Marines will see action. I don't know which one it is. I tend to believe that these Marines will not be fighting in this conflict. Actually, in the ground operation, actually the Israeli Defense Forces, they even came out with a statement this morning, and they thanked the U.S. for its support, and they assured the American people in their statement that the fighting will be done by Israeli forces, and the U.S. forces will not participate in the ground operation whenever that ground operation takes place. And speaking about the ground operation, we had an article from the Jerusalem Post with the title, "Why Has the Gaza Ground Invasion Been Delayed Since Friday?" And in this article from the Jerusalem Post, they say a number of factors seem to have caused a delay, but sources have told the Jerusalem Post that one factor has been a growing concern that Hezbollah is waiting for the moment that most IDF ground forces are committed to Gaza to open a full front with the IDF in the north. This will not stop the IDF from invading Gaza, but it may have caused a delay to better double-check signs regarding Hezbollah's intentions, as well as to further reinforce the northern forces in the case the worst comes to pass. So according to Jerusalem Post's reporting, the reason for the delay is Hezbollah and a fear that once Israel commits to the ground operation, Hezbollah will see it opening in the north and open up a second front. And so they say the delay is all about making sure that that Hezbollah does not open up a second front in the north. Now, the U.S., they have also committed ships to the Mediterranean in a show of support and a show of strength, is what the U.S. military said, what the Pentagon said, in a show of strength in order to deter Hezbollah and Iran from getting involved in this conflict. That is what the Pentagon said. That is why the U.S. Navy is currently in the Mediterranean. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, he had a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Bye-bye, pigeons. Fly away, fly away. And Netanyahu, he had a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And let me read you what TASS News is reporting with this phone call between Netanyahu and Putin. Netanyahu spoke with Putin on Monday evening and made it clear that Israel was attacked by vile and cruel murderers and has gone to war determined and united, and it won't stop until it destroys the military and government capabilities of Hamas. This is according to Netanyahu's office in an official statement. The Kremlin said earlier on Monday that Putin and Netanyahu spoke about the escalation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Russian president expressed sincere condolences to the next of kin of the killed Israelis and stated his strong disapproval and condemnation for any actions that make victims out of civilians, including women and children. The Kremlin said in their statement, the Russian president updated the Israeli prime minister about Moscow's moves to help normalize the situation in the region, prevent further escalation of violence, and avert a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Israel was informed about the highlights of the phone calls that Putin held with the Palestinian, Egyptian, Iranian, and Syrian leaders on Monday. Putin also said Russia is ready to help with a diplomatic settlement of the conflict, according to the Kremlin. So yesterday, the UN Security Council, they rejected Russia's UN resolution for a ceasefire. The UN Security Council failed to adopt a resolution proposed by Russia that would have called for humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all hostages, and access and safe evacuation of civilians. The Russian-led draft resolution received 5 votes in favor from China, Gabon, Mozambique, Russia, and the United Arab Emirates, and 4 against France, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States, with 6 abstentions: Albania, Brazil, Ecuador, Ghana, Malta, and Switzerland. So interesting that Brazil abstained, given that Brazil is part of BRICS, but you can see that China and Russia voted in favor of the UN Security Council resolution for a ceasefire. Of course, the United States, France, and the UK, and Japan voted against. This was absolutely expected. I don't think that that Russia or China were expecting that that a resolution proposed by Russia for a ceasefire to this war would have been approved by the UNSC. And I imagine the next moves from Russia and from China is to go to the UN General Assembly and get the General Assembly to approve. It would be non-binding, but not non-binding. But it would expect, Russia would expect that the UN General Assembly would approve a resolution calling for a ceasefire to the war. The one thing that that this UNSC resolution by Russia did achieve was that, according to the Russian ambassador to the United States, it showed that the U.S. was in favor of war and escalation. That is what the Russian ambassador to the United Nations said. The fact that the U.S. and the U.S.'s proxies, its allies, rejected this resolution, according to Russia, once again shows that the U.S. is for war, conflict, and escalation, and is not searching for an off-ramp to this war. So that is the update, everybody. That is the update on what is going on with this war between Israel, Hamas, in Israel and in Gaza. And let's do a couple of more stories and a couple of clown worlds. So Zelenskyy, he wanted to visit Israel, and he wanted to try to create a link between Ukraine and Israel. And we are now getting reports that when Zelenskyy asked to visit Israel, the Netanyahu government, they told Zelenskyy, now is not the right time. This is according to Ynet. Zelenskyy was allegedly told, and I quote, the time is not right for making such a trip. The outlet explained the Ukrainian president allegedly wanted to travel to the country alongside U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. His intention to visit Israel to show solidarity was first reported by Axios last Wednesday. The trip would have boosted international support for Israel's counteroffensive against Hamas in Gaza, the report suggested. Ukraine President Vladimir Zelenskyy wanted to visit Israel in an attempt to link his country's cause to that of the Jewish state, but was asked to stay away, Ynet reported on Monday. Now is not the right time. Boy, that is pretty bad for Zelenskyy. That is pretty bad. It's like asking a girl out on a date, and she says, I'm busy. I've got to do laundry or wash my hair. And now is not the right time. Don't come around bothering us, Zelenskyy. All right, I think we can do some. I think we could do some clown worlds here. Oh no, wait. We got one more story about Georgia. This is a good one. The Constitutional Court of Georgia granted the request for impeachment of President Zurabishvili. On August 31st, Zurabishvili, despite the government's refusal, attended meetings in Germany with European leaders in support of granting Georgia the status of a candidate country for EU membership. This was regarded by deputies as a gross violation of the Constitution. So when I was in Budapest, I talked about how the Georgian officials, the Georgian government, they apprehended 4 Otpor students, I guess, agitators, Otpor agitators, and I'm in Belgrade, Serbia, so Serbia knows all about Otpor and what these guys are about. Anyway, they were in Georgia and they were holding meetings. It looks like they were holding meetings to get some sort of regime change started. But USAID actually said that these students were not in Georgia for regime change. They were in Georgia for humanitarian reasons. Anyway, the Georgian government, they apprehended these 4 guys, and they said that they were in Georgia to start up some sort of color revolution. And now we have the report from Georgia, which says that the president of Georgia, Zurabishvili, well, her request to be impeached, it looks like it's going to go through, and it looks like she will be impeached. Now, Zurabishvili, she's an interesting president, I would say. I don't think she was born in Georgia, and I think she lived most of her life in France. I could be wrong about that, but I remember reading that most of her life was spent in France, or she was born and raised in France, and then she came to Georgia and she entered the political scene and eventually was appointed or became president. Anyway, it's an interesting story. She wanted to go to Germany, and the government said no. As president of Georgia, you have no reason to be in Germany at this moment. But she went to Germany nonetheless and attended meetings with European leaders without this trip being sanctioned by the government. I wonder what she was doing, meeting with European leaders without the support of the government. What was she up to? Fifth column? Anybody? Anyway, I don't know. Anyway, let's do a cloud world and we'll wrap this up. How about the latest wonder weapon? According to Defense Express, the latest wonder weapon in Ukraine will be motorcycles from Austria. and helicopters from Germany. But Austria will be donating motorcycles to the Ukraine military because according to this report for Defense Express, Ukraine, they can't advance with tanks and armored vehicles, but on foot and with motorcycles, they can advance. Maybe they'll reach the Sea of Azov on motorbikes. Anyway, the latest wonder weapon, motorcycles. And yesterday, here's an interesting story. Yesterday, Google, they had the ruble at 62.62 to the dollar. so the ruble, it surged against the dollar, but it was a mistake. It was a mistake, and it wasn't 62.62 to the US dollar, but the screenshots are floating around social media and everyone's having fun with that one. Anyway, that's the clown world. That's the video, everybody. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, and Rockfin. We are also on Twitter X, and go to the Duran shop. 10% off. No, not 10%. 20% off. Use the code TheDuran20. The Zelenskyy green special jacket. That is what I am wearing today. All right, everybody. Take care. That is the Hotel Moskva in Belgrade, Serbia. I believe it is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, hotel in Belgrade. The Hotel Moskva. Beautiful building. Also in green. All right. Take care.